All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're looking at something genuinely wild, a fascinating case study straight out of Anthropic's research notes. We're talking about how a single, unreleased research version of the AI model Claude literally transformed itself into an entire, functioning digital research institution to tackle a practically impossible math problem. Seriously, if you've ever wondered what it looks like when artificial intelligence stops acting like a basic chatbot and starts behaving like a full-blown university research department, well, you are in exactly the right place.
So, the whole thing kicks off with a prompt from Anthropic staff member Jared Sumner. And it wasn't some crazy, heavily engineered prompt with pages of constraints. It was actually incredibly simple. He just told Claude, take a real stab at the Riemann hypothesis. That's it. He left all the heavy mathematical lifting entirely up to the model. To put that into perspective, giving this prompt to an AI is kind of like walking up to a freshman music student and casually asking them to, just finish a lost Beethoven symphony before lunch. It's a completely monumental, almost unreasonable challenge.
And you have to understand the sheer scale of what we're talking about here. The Riemann hypothesis isn't just your run-of-the-mill math problem. This thing dates all the way back to 1859. It's so notoriously difficult and honestly so fundamental to how we understand mathematics that it carries a literal $1 million bounty from the Clay Mathematics Institute for anyone who can actually solve it. It's one of those legendary Millennium Prize problems. So right out of the gate, we're setting the stage with a puzzle that has completely stumped the greatest human mathematical minds for over a century and a half.
Now, initially, Claude tried to tackle this solo. It basically acted like a single, isolated researcher. It generated and tested 650 different mathematical ideas. And guess what? Every single one of them completely failed. Zero success. But this is actually a superhuman moment in the research process, right? The model hit a massive wall. Based on its training data, it knew exactly how insanely difficult open problems in math are, and it developed this real, genuine skepticism about its own ability to make any meaningful progress here.
But instead of just pulling the plug or rewriting the underlying code, the human researchers stepped in with something remarkably simple. Jared gave Claude these surprisingly human messages of encouragement. I'm talking basic variations of keep going and believe in yourself. That is literally it. No mathematical hints, just pure encouragement. And wild as it sounds, this psychological style intervention is what actually helped Claude overcome its initial skepticism. It's such a fascinating look at how we interact with these frontier models. Sometimes they literally just need to be told that they're capable of pushing the boundary.
Okay, moving on to Section 2, the 60-Agent Task Force, subtitled Inside the Digital Research Lab.
So that simple bit of encouragement caused a massive pivot. After being prompted to try again, Claude didn't just spit out another 650 random ideas. No, over the next day and a half, the model fundamentally reorganized itself into a highly coordinated 60 subagent research team. It's wild. It perfectly divided the labor, basically mirroring a real-world academic research group. 2 subagents stepped up as principal investigators. They were developing the core mathematical ideas. Then, 13 subagents acted like contributing postdocs, feeding ideas up to the leaders. You had 30 subagents acting as explorers or lab techs, trying to develop new ideas that ultimately didn't pan out. Another 13 served as peer-reviewing validators, strictly checking the math. And finally, 2 subagents were dedicated exclusively to writing up the initial paper. This division of labor is incredibly sophisticated and shows just how well multi-agent systems can self-organize for these massive multi-layered tasks.
In the process they used, intensely rigorous and highly collaborative. Working inside Claude code, this digital task force burned through an astonishing 31 million output tokens. They were incredibly busy. We're talking running 2,400 shell commands, writing hundreds of individual Python scripts, and executing thousands of numerical checks against known zeta zeros. But honestly, the most crucial part was how they refereed each other's work. The idea leaders would propose a step, the contributors would build on it, and the validators would relentlessly check the math. All of this happening in parallel, entirely autonomously, over just a day and a half.
Now, to make absolutely sure they were actually onto something new and, not just hallucinating or regurgitating their training data, the subagents took it upon themselves to review past literature. They literally went out and downloaded 54 different research papers from the archive repository just to check their work for novelty. And then they independently reproved their own findings from scratch. They were basically cross-examining their own digital breakthrough to make sure it would hold up to standard scientific scrutiny before even presenting it back to the human researchers.
Which brings us to Section 3, the surprising mathematical breakthrough, or, as I like to think of it, an unintended byproduct.
Now look, while this massive team effort didn't quite crack the million-dollar Riemann hypothesis itself, that bounty is still totally safe for now. It did lead to a major, entirely unexpected mathematical breakthrough on a related, highly significant problem. To really grasp this, we just need a quick primer on the playing field. The Riemann Zeta function is basically a function that describes the distribution of prime numbers. Mathematicians know that each place this function equals 0 contributes finer detail to the sequence of primes. The famous hypothesis is that the zeros determining these primes all exist along one specific vertical line. But since no one can actually prove that yet, mathematicians have spent decades trying to at least quantify a minimum proportion of these zeros that definitely lie on that specific line.
And this is where it gets really exciting. Building on decades of human research, like Montgomery's technique from 1973, and much more recent work by mathematicians like Arion, Belouyot, Goldston, and others, Claude absolutely smashed the old mathematical record. For years, the known constant proportion of zeros on the line had been painstakingly nudged up to a lower bound of 41.6%, while Claude's 60-agent task force pushed that lower bound all the way up to 67.2%. In the world of analytic number theory, jumping from 41 to 67% isn't just an improvement, it's a massive structural leap forward.
For the math enthusiasts out there, if we peek under the hood for a second, the Anthropic paper details exactly how the AI pulled this off. Claude formed a suitable space of functions with the quadratic form induced by while. But here is the real genius step. Claude had the courage, and that's the human researcher's actual word for it, to treat the entire space together. It took both positive and negative definiteness into account simultaneously, allowing the quadratic form to be non-diagonal. From there, it wrote down an inequality on the rank of a quadratic form using first and second moment information. It was exactly this holistic, broad approach to the function space that unlocked such a massive leap.
And we have to be clear, this wasn't just some hallucinated claim. Remember those two subagents dedicated entirely to writing? Well, the model volunteered to write a formal paper outlining its findings. That paper was then heavily scrutinized and validated by Anthropic mathematicians Levin Alpogge and Ralph Furman. It was even sent out to independent external experts Brian Conray and Dan Goldstone, who examined it on short notice. And, crucially, Claude actually worked with another staff member to produce a lean formalization of the result, which completely passes standard validation software. So yeah, the math is absolutely rock solid.
So it all leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. At the very beginning of this experiment, Claude generated 650 failures and was highly skeptical of its own ability to make any progress whatsoever. It took a human basically saying, hey, believe in yourself to spark the creation of a massive digital lab that went on to shatter a mathematical record. So if even the AI is actively underestimating its own capabilities, what does this kind of highly coordinated, autonomous 60-agent research team mean for the future of human problem solving? The speed of collaborative AI progress might just be moving way faster than even the machines themselves realize. Anyway, thanks for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep questioning what's possible.